"You are never real family," Victoria said, and the words cut sharper than I expected as I stood in the polished oak-floored office, the morning sun spilling through the blinds, casting lines across the carpet, the subtle hum of the air conditioner filling the silence. I adjusted the cuff of my cream blouse, letting the statement settle, feeling a quiet pulse of anger that I carefully tucked away, a calm surface masking decades of loyalty and care, my eyes flicking to the framed photograph of Michael, my late son, smiling in his cap and gown, the memory bittersweet. The office smelled faintly of polished wood and paper, the leather chairs lined in a semicircle, the lawyer clearing his throat and placing the folder containing the will on the cherry desk, his hands deliberate, precise, and I noticed every crease of the paper, every embossed seal, absorbing details as if cataloging them for later, the weight of anticipation pressing down, Victoria leaning slightly forward, her eyes gleaming with triumph, unaware that I had already walked in a dozen mental steps ahead, recalling every holiday dinner, every birthday celebration, every time I had sewn costumes for school plays, every meal prepared and wiped clean with care, each memory a quiet testament to a life built on love and persistence, yet now questioned, undermined by her smug confidence. I kept my breathing steady, letting the quiet swell into a controlled force, feeling the difference between shock and measured awareness, noticing the faint scent of Michael's old cologne lingering in my jacket pocket, reminding me of the years he had spent as a boy, running to me with scraped knees and the gleam of mischief in his eyes, the lawyer clearing his throat again, a subtle nudge that the reading was about to begin. I shifted my weight slightly, planting my feet firmly, the polished hardwood cool under my sensible flats, feeling each beat of my heart synchronized with the rhythm of the room, noting the small details, the weight of the envelope, the tilt of the desk lamp, the subtle way Victoria adjusted her rings, unaware that each movement was catalogued in my mind, preparing me for the moment when the tide would shift, recalling the time Michael had whispered to me in the kitchen, promising he would always protect the family, each word echoing louder now, guiding my calm as a shield. And a blade at once, my fingers resting lightly on the desk, poised but unassuming, the faint ticking of the wall clock marking seconds that seemed to stretch, Victoria's eyes flicking nervously at the papers, her smile tight. I let the quiet tension hang, savoring the room, absorbing every sight, sound, and movement, a careful observation that would serve me well, preparing for the revelation hidden in the lines of legal text, each clause a potential shift, each signature a pivot point. The lawyer looking up briefly, acknowledging the anticipation, and I inhaled slowly, letting the air fill my lungs, a calm readiness settling over me, the sunlight catching in my silver hair, reflecting softly against the polished surfaces, and I realized that this quiet patience, this controlled presence, was more powerful than any outburst, that in this silence, in this stillness, I held the space where the truth would emerge, and I could let Victoria believe she had the advantage while knowing. Deep inside, the balance of power was quietly tilting toward me as the envelope was finally opened and the words inside would shift everything. The office fell silent after the lawyer cleared his throat, the subtle hum of the air conditioner filling the space with a low, steady rhythm that seemed to echo the tension in the room. I adjusted my posture, standing with a quiet confidence, observing every movement, every glance, every slight shift in Victoria's expression as she sat rigid in the leather chair, fingers fidgeting with the edge of her bracelet, the sunlight cutting across the desk in sharp lines that highlighted the polished surfaces and the crisp folds of the legal documents, each one a piece of the puzzle I was beginning to assemble in my mind, recalling the years of careful planning, the family dinners I had orchestrated with precision, the holidays that I had coordinated down to the smallest detail, all with the intention of creating warmth and connection, and now each memory contrasted sharply with the cold indifference Victoria displayed, the way she had sidestepped my questions in previous visits, the subtle manipulation of Michael, steering conversations and decisions in ways that always left me feeling slightly excluded, a faint knot tightening in my chest as I traced each of these moments, letting the calm observation grow into understanding, noting how she had never once looked me directly in the eye during our interactions, how her voice carried a practiced sweetness that barely hid the sharp edge beneath, and I realized that this was not merely ambition, it was a carefully constructed pattern, a series of small acts designed to marginalize and control, yet I remained unmoved on the surface, letting the minutes pass, allowing each detail to embed itself in my awareness. The leather of the chair firm under my hands as I rested them lightly on the desk, fingers tapping a silent rhythm. My eyes scanning the folds of the envelope again, noting the embossed seal, the subtle indentation of the signatures, each one a potential lever, each word a possibility, and I let my thoughts wander to the quiet mornings after Michael passed, the empty kitchen where I had prepared breakfast alone, the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air, the small rituals of care that had once been shared now rendered solitary, the ache of absence mingling with the clarity of observation, the realization that while grief had been personal, it had also provided me with insight, a lens through which to see the true nature of the relationships around me. The lawyer cleared his throat once more, a deliberate, patient signal, and I allowed a small breath to escape, measured, controlled, letting it circulate through my body and sharpen my focus, feeling the cool wood beneath my feet grounding me, the polished surface of the desk reflecting light into my eyes in a way that heightened my awareness rather than distracting me, noticing the subtle curve of Victoria's lips, the slight arch of her eyebrows, the way she shifted in her seat as though sensing the impending revelation without knowing its shape, and I allowed the stillness to deepen, absorbing the space, the light, the sound, the unspoken tension, cataloging every detail, understanding that patience and observation were my greatest allies, that by remaining composed, I could anticipate each move, each subtle shift, and prepare for the moment when the careful balance of the room would tilt, when the envelope would open and the contents would reveal the power hidden in plain sight, and as the seconds stretched, I felt a quiet determination settle within me, a steady flame of resolve that illuminated the strategy forming in the depths of my mind, readying me for the subtle, controlled response that would follow, ensuring that the calm I projected masked the full extent of my awareness and preparedness, holding the tension taut, allowing the narrative to unfold while I remained the silent observer, the guardian of memory, and the quiet force poised to respond with precision when the moment arrived, the anticipation building like a low hum in the room, unbroken, unyielding, perfectly measured against the rhythm of the quiet office and the distant echo of the city beyond the tall windows, leaving Victoria unaware that the careful web she had spun around herself was already being traced and understood by the woman she thought she had outmaneuvered. The lawyer's fingers hovered over the paper as he prepared to read aloud, and I felt the weight of the moment settle like a heavy fog across the room, the polished oak desk gleaming under the morning light that streamed in through the blinds, casting thin stripes over the folded envelopes. I kept my posture steady, hands resting lightly on the desk, observing Victoria shifting in her seat, her smile tight, eyes darting from the folder to me, and back, unaware that I was cataloging every subtle movement, every inflection, every micro-expression, the way her fingers tapped against her knee with a barely perceptible rhythm, the faint scent of her perfume hanging in the air as I recalled the countless dinners I had prepared for Michael, the way I had ironed his shirts and coordinated family gatherings to ensure harmony, the quiet patience it had taken to navigate the delicate dynamics of a blended household. And I let each memory reinforce my calm, turning past frustration into silent vigilance, absorbing the room, the lighting, the distant muffled sounds of the city beyond the windows, noting the slight furrow of Victoria's brow as the envelope was opened, the rustle of paper as the lawyer carefully lifted each sheet, the soft echo against the hardwood floor, the tension stretching thin and taut like a string ready to snap, the leather of the chairs reflecting light in small polished glints, each detail sharpening my awareness, allowing me to anticipate without haste, without revealing my understanding, the quiet power in observation, the patience that builds pressure beneath a calm exterior, a controlled force ready to act at the right moment, Victoria's gaze flicking to me once more, uncertain now, her body language shifting slightly, revealing a flicker of doubt, and I felt a subtle satisfaction in knowing she could not fully predict my composure. The office still, the only sound the lawyer's deliberate breathing and the soft shuffle of paper, each second stretching long enough to let me feel the arc of every decision made in the past, the acts of kindness, the meticulous attention to family details, the way Michael had trusted me implicitly, all converging to strengthen my resolve. The edges of the room lined with the quiet presence of polished furniture and law books, creating a sense of permanence and weight, grounding me, centering me as I waited, letting the stillness fill the space, feeling each heartbeat, the pulse of memory and calculation interwoven, Victoria's subtle movements betraying her growing awareness that the simple act of opening the will would not yield the advantage she expected, and I let that awareness simmer quietly within me, a reservoir of calm and measured intent, each inhale reinforcing control, each exhale releasing tension into the polished air, the anticipation building, the legal papers waiting to be read, and I remained steady, poised, the quiet force beneath the calm exterior, knowing the moment of revelation would arrive, and when it did, the balance of power would shift quietly, inevitably, as the truth embedded in the lines of legal text began to take shape and settle into the room, leaving Victoria and the lawyer alike suspended in the measured, deliberate rhythm of the unfolding narrative, with every detail, every subtle gesture accounted for in my mind, preparing me for the precise, calm response that would follow. As the lawyer began reading the provisions aloud, I felt a controlled calm sweep over me, each word resonating with the weight of decades spent caring for a family that now seemed to question my place within it, my eyes tracing the precise language of each clause, absorbing the structure and implications without haste, the polished wood of the desk gleaming softly under the morning light, the hum of the air conditioning steady and even, the faint scent of leather and paper mingling with the subtle floral notes from the office plants. Victoria's posture tensed slightly as her gaze followed the movements of the envelope, her confidence now tempered with the awareness that she had not anticipated this level of composure, my mind moving through the years of quiet preparation, every dinner planned with care, every holiday coordinated to perfection, every time I had gone out of my way to maintain peace and harmony within the family, and I catalogued all these memories with precision, letting them reinforce the steady control I held in the present, noting the subtle glances between Victoria and the lawyer, the minor shifts in their expressions, the slight tightening of her hands around her purse, the almost imperceptible flick of her eyes toward me. Each detail a confirmation of the pattern I had long suspected. The way she had maneuvered around me, how she had influenced decisions with Michael, how she had created distance under the guise of concern, all of it now coming into sharper focus, yet I remained outwardly composed, my breathing measured, my stance unwavering, my gaze clear and deliberate, absorbing every element of the office, the sound of papers shifting, the quiet scratch of pen on parchment, the sunlight tracing lines across the room, the reflections on the polished surfaces, the subtle color variations in the legal documents, all catalogued and stored, allowing me to anticipate and understand the movements and intentions without reacting impulsively. Victoria shifting slightly in her chair, her smile faltering, a trace of doubt creeping in as she realized the calm before her was not weakness, but a measured observation, and I allowed the room to settle into this tension, each second stretching with anticipation, the power not in loud declarations or overt confrontation but in the quiet, patient attention to detail, the mental mapping of every interaction, every hidden intention, the silent readiness to respond at the perfect moment, and as the lawyer continued, I felt the subtle satisfaction of knowing that this stillness, this patience, this meticulous awareness would guide the unfolding of events, ensuring that when the conclusion came, the narrative would tilt in favor of clarity, fairness, and quiet authority, leaving Victoria to reckon with the depth of my presence and the careful attention I had maintained throughout, the weight of years, of experience, and of deliberate observation coalescing into a poised, unshakable command of the space, each breath and gesture reinforcing the calm, deliberate force that would shape what came next, holding every detail in mind while maintaining the outward appearance of serene detachment. fully aware that the smallest observation could shift the balance and that the careful unfolding of the reading would reveal the measure of truth and the subtle yet unmistakable assertion of agency I had cultivated over a lifetime of dedication and quiet resilience. The lawyer's voice filled the room as he carefully articulated each section of the will, the words precise, deliberate, each sentence hanging in the air, and I felt a quiet surge of clarity wash over me, a deep, steady understanding of the careful planning Michael had put into ensuring fairness, every detail recorded, every clause designed to prevent misinterpretation, the office itself a study in measured control. The polished oak desk gleaming softly under the light streaming in through the blinds, the air faintly scented with paper and leather, a subtle warmth from the sun on the hardwood floor, Victoria shifting in her chair, eyes narrowing slightly as she followed the lawyer's movements, the faint tension in her shoulders betraying a flicker of uncertainty, and I observed without reacting, cataloging every micro-expression, every tilt of her head, the way her hands clasped together and unclasped, the subtle twitch of a smile that did not reach her eyes, noting the way she glanced quickly at me, a question unspoken, and I let the silence stretch, filling the room with measured anticipation, remembering the quiet mornings I had spent preparing breakfast for Michael before he left for work, the careful arrangement of the dining table, the way I had ironed his shirts and kept his favorite coffee ready, the decades of small, deliberate gestures of care, now mirrored in my own stillness, the awareness that observation and patience could carry power as effectively as words or overt actions. The lawyer continued to read, the faint shuffle of paper punctuating the rhythm of the office, my fingers resting lightly on the edge of the desk, feeling the smooth, polished surface beneath, grounding me, giving me a sense of measured stability, the quiet control I held amplifying with each moment, every memory of family dinners, of birthdays celebrated, of holidays meticulously planned, each act of care now reinforcing the strength of the calm I projected, Victoria's gaze flicking to me again, her confidence wavering as she realized my stillness was not absence of power but a deliberate, strategic presence, the sunlight catching strands of my silver hair, reflecting off the polished surfaces, glinting softly in the quiet room, the lawyer pausing briefly before continuing, allowing the weight of each sentence to settle, the air thick with anticipation and subtle tension, the quiet hum of the air conditioning steady, almost imperceptible, marking time as I catalogued each nuance, every subtle inflection of Victoria's voice, the gentle creak of the leather chair as she shifted, the almost imperceptible rise and fall of her chest, each movement absorbed and noted, a mental map forming of every detail that could influence the outcome. The lawyer's measured reading proceeding, and I allowed myself to feel the careful satisfaction of understanding the pattern that had unfolded over years, the quiet knowledge that patience and observation were my allies, that the smallest gesture could shift perception, that the calm I maintained was both shield and blade, ready to respond at the perfect moment, Victoria's posture rigid, her confidence now tempered, the room itself seemingly holding its breath, the polished floor reflecting the sunlight in long lines, the subtle warmth on my skin grounding me, every sound, every movement, catalogued and understood, each second expanding to allow full comprehension of the unfolding events, my own breathing measured and controlled, maintaining focus, ensuring that when the final words were spoken, the room would reflect not confusion but the quiet authority of someone who had long observed, anticipated, and prepared, a force that was calm, deliberate, and entirely unshakable, leaving Victoria and the lawyer to witness the unfolding with the awareness that my quiet patience had positioned me precisely where I needed to be, every detail accounted for, every subtle shift in power anticipated, and the narrative unfolding exactly as it was meant to, measured, deliberate, and inexorably moving toward clarity and resolution. As the lawyer continued reading, I allowed myself to observe every nuance in the room, the faint shift of Victoria's expression, the subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers drummed lightly against the edge of the leather chair, the quiet hum of the air conditioning marking each passing moment, the sunlight stretching across the polished floor in long, deliberate lines, highlighting the neat rows of books on the shelves, the slight reflection of my silver hair catching the light, and giving me a sense of presence that was both grounded and commanding, each detail catalogued silently in my mind, the rhythm of the reading slow and deliberate, allowing the weight of each clause to settle into the space, Victoria's gaze flicking toward me, uncertain, a flicker of doubt crossing her features. As if sensing the subtle control I held, the office itself a stage of quiet power, the polished oak desk acting as a barrier and anchor, grounding me in each breath, each movement deliberate, measured, allowing the tension to stretch, the small shuffling of papers, the soft scrape of a pen against parchment, the gentle flicker of the blinds in the sunlit room, all absorbed and noted, building a mental map of intentions, of small acts and gestures, of the patterns of manipulation and control that had unfolded over years, each observation reinforcing my calm, the patience of long experience allowing me to anticipate without haste, without urgency, the small micro-expressions, the shifts in posture, the quiet nervousness that Victoria could not mask, each minute revealing the layers of her design, her confidence now tempered, her smirk fading as the reading continued, and I felt the satisfaction of quiet knowledge, the understanding that my stillness, my calm, was not absence but a strategy, a measured presence that would guide the unfolding, that would allow each subtle detail to inform the response when the right moment arrived, the sunlight shifting slightly as the hours passed, brushing across the polished surfaces, reflecting in soft glints off the framed photographs, the leather of the chairs, the smooth edges of the desk, and I remained rooted, poised, every heartbeat measured, every inhale reinforcing the control, the calm attention sharpening the mind, each detail reinforcing the narrative of quiet authority, of patient observation, of readiness, of understanding the arc of intentions, of choices, of consequences, Victoria's posture shifting again, fingers tightening lightly, eyes narrowing as she sensed the depth of awareness before her, the office a cocoon of deliberate attention, the lawyer's voice steady, measured, each word of the will resonating clearly, the air filled with anticipation and subtle tension, the polished hardwood grounding the space, the slight warmth of the sunlight giving a sense of continuity and presence, and I let the quiet swell into deliberate focus, the long years of experience, of care, of silent vigilance coalescing into this singular moment of controlled awareness, each movement catalogued, each micro-expression observed, each breath timed, allowing me to remain calm yet fully prepared, the room holding its collective breath, the narrative unfolding under the steady, unyielding presence of someone who has spent a lifetime observing, understanding, and preparing for exactly this moment, poised, patient, and ready for the subtle, inevitable shift of balance to reveal itself as the lawyer read on, and the final details of the estate became increasingly clear, the quiet power in my stillness evident, the measured control apparent in each gesture, each glance, each observation, every second meticulously absorbed, every moment sharpening the mind and spirit for what would come next, a calm, deliberate force beneath the surface of the room, quietly guiding the unfolding of events. The final pages of the will were being carefully unfolded, and I allowed the room to settle into a measured quiet, absorbing every detail with a deliberate patience, the sunlight streaming through the blinds catching the edge of the polished oak desk, casting soft lines across the smooth surface, Victoria's eyes darting repeatedly to the documents, her lips pressed into a thin line. The faint click of her bracelet against her wrist, the only audible sound aside from the lawyer's calm, deliberate voice, each word carefully pronounced, each sentence weighted, and I felt a serene clarity wash over me, the years of careful observation and quiet resilience coalescing into a single, focused presence, my posture steady, shoulders relaxed but firm, hands resting lightly on the desk, fingers brushing against the fine grain of the wood as I catalogued every movement, every hesitation, every subtle gesture from Victoria, her shifting weight, the quick glance toward me, the slight furrow of her brow, all signs of the tension beneath her composed exterior, and I allowed each observation to deepen my understanding, recalling quietly the decades spent preparing family meals, coordinating holidays, tending to Michael's needs, smoothing over disagreements with careful attention. The patience required to maintain harmony now reflected in the calm power of my presence. The lawyer continuing methodically through the final items, the quiet scrape of paper punctuating the rhythm of the office. The polished floor reflecting the sunlight in subtle patterns, the gentle warmth on my hands grounding me as I remained fully aware, absorbing every detail, each subtle cue reinforcing the pattern I had long recognized. Victoria's confidence waning, her slight movements betraying a growing awareness that the careful stillness before her was not passivity, but deliberate strength, a reservoir of calm prepared for action. The quiet steadiness drawing the energy of the room toward me, the narrative of the reading unfolding in layers, the words and clauses forming a lattice that supported clarity and truth, the air itself seeming to hold its breath as the lawyer reached the penultimate section, my mind mapping every possibility, anticipating the subtle reactions, the shifts in expression, each nuance carefully noted, a mental archive of observation and strategy, sunlight highlighting the soft reflections on the leather of the chairs, the polished surfaces, the subtle shadows that stretched across the walls. The office a space of both observation and quiet authority, the measured passage of time marked by the low hum of the air conditioning and the faint tick of the clock, the final clause approaching, the culmination of the reading, and I allowed the anticipation to swell, a careful tension held in patience, not in haste, knowing that the careful attention, the quiet presence, the steady, composed observation would reveal the true dynamics of the room, the subtle shifts of power now unmistakable. Victoria's lips parting slightly, a faint intake of breath. The awareness that she had underestimated the depth of my understanding, that every act, every gesture, every carefully timed pause had been catalogued and understood, the quiet dominance in my stillness, the patience and resilience of a lifetime, guiding the unfolding toward clarity and resolution, the lawyer's voice steady, each word a measured step, the room holding its attention on the balance between observation and revelation, every detail accounted for, every moment building toward the subtle, inevitable shift in perception, the quiet assertion of agency that had been cultivated over decades, and the measured calm I maintained spoke more powerfully than any spoken word, drawing the narrative to its poised, inevitable pivot, leaving Victoria to recognize, silently, the controlled authority that had been present all along, unshakable and deliberate, shaping the moment without haste, with clarity, and with the quiet force of a lifetime of observation and care. As the lawyer reached the conclusion of the reading, I remained perfectly still, absorbing each word, letting the rhythm of the office, the polished hardwood floors, the soft light streaming through the blinds, and the faint scent of leather and paper ground me in the present, Victoria's eyes flicking nervously toward the documents, her fingers tightening slightly around her purse, the subtle shift in her posture betraying the growing awareness that my calm was not weakness, but deliberate observation, every nuance, every movement, every micro-expression catalogued with careful precision in my mind, the faint scrape of paper, the soft hum of the air conditioner, the measured voice of the lawyer reading each clause, all layering into the environment I held firmly in my awareness, and I allowed myself to reflect briefly on the countless mornings spent preparing breakfast for Michael, ensuring his coffee was ready, his favorite oatmeal prepared, the house quiet and orderly, the holidays meticulously planned, family dinners organized down to the smallest detail, each act of care a thread in the tapestry of connection and stability, now juxtaposed against Victoria's subtle manipulations, the gentle undercurrent of tension she created, steering conversations and decisions in ways that subtly excluded me, the awareness of her pattern sharpening my focus, the quiet power of observation becoming a force in itself, the sunlight glinting softly off the polished surfaces, highlighting the careful lines of the documents, the framed photographs on the walls, the edges of the desk, reflecting a subtle warmth that contrasted with the controlled tension in the room, the slow, deliberate cadence of the lawyer's reading marking the passage of time, each sentence reinforcing the structure and intent of Michael's careful planning, my breathing steady, each inhale filling me with calm, and each exhale releasing unnecessary tension, the weight of decades of experience, resilience, and careful attention to family dynamics settling in. Victoria shifting again, a slight narrowing of her eyes, a fleeting hesitation, the momentary realization that the calm figure before her had anticipated her moves, had catalogued every gesture, every inflection, every subtle attempt at influence, and I let the stillness expand, filling the space with quiet authority, the small reflections in the leather of the chairs, the polished desk, and the sunlight across the floor serving as markers of continuity and presence. The lawyer's voice guiding the narrative with measured precision, each clause a careful reinforcement of clarity and fairness, the air thick with the unspoken tension of recognition, the subtle awareness that the control I maintained was complete, poised, and deliberate, each second reinforcing the unbroken thread of observation and readiness, the faintest smile playing on my lips, not revealing intention but confirming awareness, the culmination of patient vigilance and deliberate attention. The room holding its breath along with me, the narrative unfolding precisely as intended, each motion, each sound, each microexpression a part of the web of understanding I had built over years of careful observation, the calm, deliberate presence I maintained now fully commanding the space, Victoria's composure faltering slightly as the quiet assertion of awareness and measured authority became undeniable, the polished surfaces reflecting light, warmth, and presence, the subtle rhythm of the office becoming a metronome of patient control, and as the final sentence of the will was read aloud, the realization of intention, fairness, and the careful alignment of justice settled firmly, quietly, and undeniably into the room, leaving Victoria and the lawyer to absorb the depth of quiet command, the deliberate, unshakable presence that had guided every moment of the reading, a culmination of patience, observation, and the calm, enduring strength of a lifetime of dedication and understanding. The final words of the reading hung in the air, each syllable precise and deliberate, resonating in the polished office with a weight that settled deeply into the space. I remained still, absorbing the outcome with a quiet clarity that had been cultivated over decades, the sunlight glinting off the oak desk and reflecting softly across the leather chairs, Victoria's expression shifting subtly as she processed the implications, her eyes flicking toward me repeatedly, searching for a reaction. That never came, and I let the calm settle fully, each inhale steady, each exhale measured, cataloging every nuance, every tiny flicker of doubt, every hesitation that passed over her face, the faint rustle of paper punctuating the silence, the slow hum of the air conditioner marking time in the background, all contributing to the rhythm of the room. The weight of responsibility and legacy intertwined with the careful attention I had maintained throughout. Memories of family dinners, carefully prepared breakfasts, holidays coordinated down to the smallest detail, the acts of care that had been quietly woven into every interaction now echoing in the present moment, reinforcing the calm and poised control I projected, the lawyer's voice having receded to a measured silence as the final sentences were absorbed, leaving a pregnant pause in which every person in the room could feel the significance of the decisions laid out, Victoria shifting once more, a small tightening of her hands, a subtle narrowing of her eyes, realizing that the quiet, deliberate presence before her had anticipated her every calculation, that the careful observation, the patient attention, and the years of unwavering composure had guided the entire unfolding, the polished floor reflecting the light in long, soft lines, the framed photographs and legal books lending a sense of permanence, grounding the space, the room itself seeming to hold its breath as the quiet authority settled, the measured calm I had maintained now asserting itself without a word, the subtle power of presence, the careful collection of details, the full awareness of intention, of manipulation, of subtle influence now laid bare in the room, and I allowed the tension to linger, not in haste or outburst, but in the steady, undeniable clarity of someone who had observed, understood, and anticipated, each second stretching to accommodate the full breadth of awareness, each breath reinforcing the quiet strength and the deliberate, patient vigilance that had guided the unfolding. Victoria's lips parting slightly, a soft intake of breath, a flicker of recognition passing through her eyes as she realized that every step, every gesture, every careful manipulation she had employed had been met with calm comprehension, and in that stillness, in the quiet, measured authority that radiated from me, the subtle shift of power was evident, the culmination of patience, observation, and decades of careful attention to family, legacy, and truth fully realized, the polished office bathed in soft light, the air thick with the unspoken understanding that the quiet, deliberate presence I maintained had guided the entire narrative, leaving Victoria and the lawyer to witness the depth of composure and the unshakable, deliberate force that had quietly directed the unfolding toward clarity, resolution, and the subtle yet unmistakable assertion of agency, the room holding the weight of a lifetime of care, attention, and unwavering observation, each detail noted, each subtle shift accounted for, the quiet authority complete, undeniable, and fully in control, leaving the space charged with anticipation for the next chapter of understanding and recognition.